All right, so thank you everybody for joining us. We are here we're kind of celebrating American Wetlands Month for the month of May. It's kind of a celebration that was started because of the Environmental Protection Agency. And tonight we're going to be hearing from some awesome presenters from Platte Basin Timelapse, who are also with UNL. They're going to be talking to us about the outreach and education, the wetland outreach and education project that Game and Parks is working on. And we're working with Platte Basin Timelapse and also Ducks Unlimited and another co-op unit from UNL. So it's a really cool project where we're working to, it's a grant-based project from the EPA, and we're going to create some great educational materials for as like a wetland guide for adults. We're making a wetland activity booklet that's for students. And we're also just they're putting together some really great visual resources that we're using in this project. And yeah, so they are gonna share some of the things that they've been collecting and while they're spending time out in some of Nebraska's wetlands. And I'll probably let them each introduce themselves, and then maybe after each one of you presents, we could pause right after one of you goes, and just if anybody has questions, we can have a little bit of time for that before we move on. And then if you guys want, we can save them to the end. So yeah, whoever wants to go ahead and start us off, feel free to go for it.
Yeah, I'll be controlling the keynote today. So I will start. Let me just share my screen. 1 second. Oh. Sorry, 1 sec. Okay, can you guys see this?
Yep, it looks good.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so I know some of you on the screen know who I am, but for those who don't, I'll give just a quick, brief introduction of myself. My name's Mariah Lundgren, and I was born and raised in Omaha, Nebraska. I spent my summers in a small cabin in South Central Oregon with my family. And I was, I guess, what you would call a feral child, I suppose. My parents really encouraged me to be outside as much as possible. So naturally, my childhood fostered my love and curiosity for the natural world. So I went out, I went to school for environmental studies and fisheries and wildlife at the University of Nebraska. My senior year, I was introduced to the idea of combining my background in science and my love for photography and using that as a tool to educate people about our natural world and conservation issues and challenges. So from there, I pursued a career in conservation storytelling. Oh. And I was also introduced to the Platte Basin Timelapse project. I interned for that project for about a year. And then when I graduated, I was hired on to the project full time. And now I am a producer and project manager for PBT. And I've been with PBT, I think, for about 5 years now. And for those that might not know what Platte Basin Timelapse is, or PBT, PBT is a long-term multimedia documentary project that aims to educate people about where their water comes from and what it means to live in a watershed. So how we do that is we do that through innovative technologies and multimedia storytelling. So one of those projects, which Grace introduced, is Wetlands of Nebraska. So we're working with Nebraska Game and Parks and a handful of other organizations on this large wetlands project to redo the guidebook, but also incorporate multimedia elements into the Wetlands of Nebraska educational material for the public and for schools. So today, what we're going to show you is just a tiny glimpse of some of the things that we've been working on this project. So it'll be a very shallow dive, I would say, of the behind the scenes of the project. Okay, so here's a map to give you an overview of the wetlands areas we'll be focusing on. We have divided this project into 5 wetland types, which are the playa wetlands, riverine wetlands, saline wetlands, sandhills wetlands, and also the urban wetlands, which we do not have on this map. This is one of the older maps from the last time this project was done. So we'll have an updated map that will include that as well. This is a map that I put together of some of the field locations that we've been to for this project. So all those orange dots are some of the main locations that we have worked out of or will be working out of this summer. COVID slowed us down, as it slowed a lot of projects down last year. So we weren't able to get into the field as much as we would have hoped to, but we are full steam ahead this summer. So we'll be out there a lot, which is very exciting. So one of the first projects that we worked on last year was studio photography with some really unique and charismatic wetland species. So this was at the Wildcat Hills Nature Center. They have a variety of animals in captivity there that were either found on that were injured before and can't be re-released or what have you. So let's see here. So here is a video reel of just some of the videos that we captured from that particular shoot. So snapping turtle, bullfrog, painted turtle, I believe. Those guys were really fast and hard to photograph. And this darling couple of woodhouse toads. It's a male and a female, I do believe. And then the star of our show, the Blandings turtle. So one of the main stories that we're focusing on in the Sandhills portion of this wetlands grant is about the Blandings turtle, which it's a really interesting story because the Blandings turtle is threatened and endangered in a lot of its other home ranges across the Great Plains, but in the Sandhills, the Blandings turtle is thriving. And that's due to the expansive wetland habitat that is available for that species. So we'll just watch this. This one has audio to it. Okay, let's see. So another tool that we're using is drones. So this is me flying a drone on my back. Most of the time, our drone flights go perfectly well. No problems here, but you know, as all field work goes, sometimes things don't go the way you planned. So it's Ethan, who on the left, Pete, and myself. I think Pete took off the drone and the propeller wasn't quite on the drone tight enough and it flew off. So it's kind of a funny situation. And our faces sort of say it all too. Okay, so drones have allowed us to get into the air and they've shown us perspectives we would not normally get to see. So I would say even 5 years ago, to get a shot like this, it would take days and days of planning and hundreds of dollars to try to coordinate an airplane flight to capture a photograph like this. And even if you do that planning, you know, the weather or what's happening might not work out for you. So drones have really allowed us to see Nebraska and see these wetlands in a really, really unique way. Yeah, so we're basically able to act on a whim. So if there's a really awesome storm and a rainbow appears, it's like, get that drone in the air. We got to capture that. And that's exactly what happened in this situation. I'm really glad that we had that. So it shows us these big, vast, beautiful landscapes. Oops. Also shows us really unique colors and patterns on the landscape and in these wetlands. And you probably can't see this due to size of your screens, but you can see tracks around this wetland area as well. So they also reveal to us hidden worlds. So these are wetlands peppered in between rows of corn and soybeans. So these are the playa wetlands, and this is really difficult to see from the side of the road. But once you get into the air, then you really have a good clear view of what these wetlands amongst the corn can look like. They can also really show us, so yeah, they show us different perspectives, and they can really, I guess, what am I trying to say? They put these wetlands in proximity to, they can show us how close these wetlands really are to urban and city developments. So if I was on the ground, I wouldn't be able to see the city in the background as well as I can if I'm 100 feet in the air. So different perspectives. We've also started to make drone time lapses. So we've picked 14 different locations and have mapped out 14 different flights that we will revisit over the course of a year. And we will create what you call drone time lapses. So this is the first time we're trying this, and we've managed to do a couple flights at each of these locations, and what we have figured out is proven to work. So we're really excited to go back and to keep doing these flights to see these wetlands change in all 4 seasons. And we are, of course, using game cameras and camera traps. So this right here is an off-the-shelf game camera. It's called a Reconyx, and this Reconyx was on this snag for, oh gosh, probably a year and a half. And this snag is at a local saline wetland just north of Lincoln. And so I was walking in this wetland one day and I thought, I wonder what comes to sit on that perch right there. So the other part of the tree was very conveniently split, so I could just easily screw that game camera into the tree to watch this perch over the course of a year. And this is what it captured. So meadowlark, sorry if that's a little loud for you guys. Kestrel, eating a spider. red-tailed hawk. All right, someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure this is a short-tailed owl, or short-eared owl. Great horned owl with a snack. So some of those videos are pretty graphic, but that's nature for you. And then also some fuzzy animals. So possum and raccoon have made an appearance as well. All right. Now I'm going to pass it over to Dakota.
All right. Yeah, I'll just give a brief introduction. My name is Dakota Altman. I hail from Lincoln, Nebraska, home of the Salt Creek Tiger Beetle. I'm not going to say football. Yeah, I guess I've been fascinated with nature ever since I could remember. And there was such a time, if you can believe, that I wanted to move out of Lincoln, out of Nebraska, to kind of explore different places and live somewhere else. But I've definitely come to love this place, and there are way too many hidden gems that are way too cool to leave behind. So I decided to kind of pursue a passion in this conservation storytelling, as Mariah has told you. And so I'm going to school for a Master of Applied Science, but with an emphasis in this storytelling career. So into this presentation, I'll talk about camera trapping on a saline wetland. This is called Little Salt Fork Marsh. It's north of Lincoln, closer to Raymond than it is to Lincoln. But this was on a really cool thunderstorm evening. So camera trapping is another tool we use for the Platte Basin Timelapse project. It involves just a few essential sort of elements. There's flashes, there's stakes that you mount the flashes to. There's a camera along with its housing, and the housing has special circuitry that enables you to take photos in the daytime or at night, but also different levels of sensitivity to like the creatures that cross in front of it, and also different amounts of photos that can be taken per trigger. So this is kind of my setup. The way you sort of set up if you want flashes is you put the camera in the center, the flashes off to the side. If you're using flashes, it's sort of best to know your subject, and also if your flashes are helpful at night. So this is on a badger hole. So I wanted to really capture a badger. But yeah, so then what I do is I typically will test the camera. I'll sort of walk in front of it or sort of make kind of quick movements in front of it. And a lot of times it doesn't take the most flattering of images, but it does tell me that it's working. So it's really nice to have help. This is some friends and coworkers helping to set up on a different location, my camera trap set up and kind of helping test. And it does take a while to set it up and get everything right. So it's really nice to have help with that. Yeah, the mosquitoes are really, really bad, especially out in the saline wetlands. It's sort of, they make you be very precise and sort of get in and out as quick as possible, as they're persistent in sucking your blood. It's relentless. Yeah, with camera trapping, a lot of it is trial and error, and a lot of it is patience. You're not always going to get the photo you want the first try. Sometimes it'll take 100 tries, 100 photographs, maybe even more. And this one took plenty of photos of grass. It's definitely not what we want, but it's kind of what happens when you put your camera trap in a prairie. Sometimes it'll capture these unique kind of moments. This is a rabbit that had jumped in front of the sensor, and after a few photos, I actually realized that on its right side, it was missing an eye, probably from escaping like the claws or the mouth of a fox or some predatory animal. And you also get the occasional dog, some dog walker walking his dog along this, saline wetland. It's furry, it's a mammal, but it's definitely not the badger that I was after. And then after many tries, finally got the badger. There's some water spots and mud that's sort of obscuring its nose, but still nonetheless it was a badger. And so a few paces down from that badger hole, from the hill, we set up on a salt flat where there's saltwort growing and trying to capture the diversity of shorebirds. So the first photo was a white-tailed deer pair, I think. And sometimes it'll capture, you're good. Sometimes it'll capture invertebrates. I don't think the monarch in the background that you can barely see triggered the sensor. I think it was grass, but quite unique to sort of visually get an insect in focus. This is an upland sandpiper, sort of unique to eastern Nebraska. They nest out in the sandhills, so western Nebraska. But this kind of just shows you that these saline wetlands are home to a great many species and are really great stopovers for shorebirds and migratory birds. And then the sort of the money shot, not what I was really after, but really unique sort of photo to get the moon in the background and a raccoon sort of coming up to the camera. And this last photo was just taken today. I was out helping, or I was setting up my camera trap in an urban wetland in Pete Stegan's backyard. And he was in that drone photo, but him and his wife have a wild learning sort of school that they're taking on a few students, a few kids, and teaching them sort of a different style of learning. And so I showed them today sort of how camera traps work, and just really amazing to see the next generation sort of be intrigued by this stuff and intrigued with nature. And yeah.
All right, my turn. Hey everybody, I'm Ethan Freeze. I'm also producer at Platte Basin Timelapse. That photos of a duck, not me, but I'll get into that more in a second. So I've been with Platte Basin Timelapse since 2015. I started as a production intern and then started a Master's of Applied Science program with PBT, looking at and I was doing some multimedia stories, looking at some local prairies, and now I'm a producer with PBT working on primarily this wetlands project, and I'm focusing on playa wetlands, which, if you don't know what a playa wetland is, it's a wetland that's filled by precipitation, and a lot of times they'll have a thick clay layer that kind of puddles the water at the surface. So a lot of times these playa wetlands will have a lot of water in spring and attract a lot of migratory waterfowl. So this is an American widgeon here in this photo. And then next one is a northern pintail drake and hen, and the drake in this photo is performing a courtship display. And I took these photos using a photo blind that I constructed out in a playa in the rainwater basins in central Nebraska. So these blinds allow you to get really close to wildlife and allow you to see a lot of really unique behaviors that you wouldn't otherwise probably get to see. And it was pretty phenomenal to see the migration this spring from a blind. So this is what one of these blinds looks like. If you look closely there, you can see Dakota peeking out of his grassy cocoon. So a decent amount of planning goes in beforehand before you put a blind on the ground. So you need to kind of scout out and decide if it's going to be a good location and try to get that blind in place before a lot of these migratory birds come through. So this video here, this is not from this year. This is probably from about 3 or 4 years ago of the first blind kind of this fashion that I made. And this is how I typically like to make blinds. And what it is it's basically some garden fence that I've shaped to kind of whatever shape I want. A lot of times I'll lay down in these blinds. Sometimes I'll sit up, and then I just cover it in burlap and then attach some woven grass mats to it. And then I'll also just cut some dead vegetation from the surrounding area and attach that to the blind just to help it blend in a little bit more with the landscape. So that time lapse just kind of showed you that process. So yeah, a lot of times you have to sit around in a blind for a while before the wildlife comes by. So it's good to bring some food and some other stuff to keep you entertained. I've found that bringing some pizza along when you have a long stay in the blind works pretty well. Yeah, you can get a lot of different food groups in there, and it doesn't make a lot of noise when you're eating it. So it works out pretty well in the blind when you're laying in there all day. And you also have to be careful about, yeah, if you're too close to the water and get a lot of rain, the blind could flood. So this is the same blind that you saw Dakota in earlier. And this was last month when I went to go take it down. And I'm sure a lot of you are from Nebraska, so you know we've got a decent amount of rain this spring. So that rain really filled up a lot of the wetlands in the rainwater basin and some of the other playa wetlands around the state. So I was fortunate enough to have a few good weeks of shooting from this blind before it flooded though. And of course, it's always good to have some friends along to help set up and haul everything out to your spot, and yeah, just get everything ready. So yeah, always good to work as a team. And I guess this next section, Dakota and I can kind of do jointly. So we're going to show some photos from a recent field outing we had. That was probably one of my favorite outings we've had so far for this wetlands project. So a few weeks ago, we went out to a 6,000 acre prescribed burn on Valentine National Wildlife Refuge in the Nebraska Sandhills. And we were on this burn all day. We had worked with some of the group. There was a lot of people from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service that were planning the burn. So we worked with them to get permission to get on this burn. And it went all day, and it got really tiring, but then once the sun kind of dipped below the horizon, the fire just lit up the hills around. This is Hackberry Lake, you can see here in the foreground, and it was probably one of the coolest things that I've ever seen. I don't know if you have anything else to say about it.
No, just behind the scenes, these images look fascinating, but they do take a lot of time and patience, and sort of like Ethan was saying, we were up from 9 a.m. in the morning till probably midnight, and that's not to say that the people working on this fire were also busy and hard at work. They were probably there a lot longer than we were.
Much harder than we did. Yeah.
But yeah.
And this is a photo that Dakota took. And the reason that we decided to include this photo is we actually put, if you can see that fire tower in the background, we actually put a time-lapse camera out on that before the burn and checked it a few times during the burn to swap out memory card and batteries. So this is a time lapse from that fire tower, watching this burn progress. And yeah, you don't realize how big 6,000 acres is until you really get out there, but it was a massive area with a lot of wetlands kind of interspersed throughout. You can see some of those big sandhills lakes in the background there.
And in doing this burn that they did, it will really help cut back a lot of the invasive species like Phragmites and some of the encroaching cattails, and really spruce up and bring to life a lot of the diverse wetland vegetation, as well as like habitat for Atlantic turtles that sort of has been covered by a lot of this stuff. Just like a prairie burn, but across a wetland.
So I guess while we're on the topic of time lapse, thought I'd mention some of our, we call them long form time lapse cameras that are out on the landscape for months or years. So this is one of the cameras that we set up for this wetland project, and it's in a rainwater basin wetland. And that last photo was Dakota up there swapping cards on that camera. So this next photo that's kind of what the inside of our cameras, time-lapse cameras, look like. They're in a weatherproof housing. They're powered by solar panels. We can kind of control the timing of the camera, how often it takes photos with a little switchboard, which you can see on the side there. And then this is a time lapse from that same camera on a rainwater basin wetland. So this is what is considered a playa wetland. And you can see just how dramatically the water levels shift throughout the year, kind of depending on precipitation. And this is just from, let me think, this is from about March of 2020 to September of October 2020. So you can see that wetland went from full to completely dry over the course of the summer. And if you were to go out to this location where the camera is now, it's completely filled with water with all the rain we've gotten recently. So these time lapses just do a really good job at showing how dynamic some of these landscapes and some of these wetland landscapes are. So
yeah, I'd like to note that the camera traps as well as the time-lapse cameras are made possible by a guru, Jeff Dale, who is a whiz at this stuff, and he's perfected this craft of, you know, making these circuit boards especially for the project, as well as camera trap systems.
Ethan?
Yeah.
You want to?
Oh, go and yeah, Princess, I guess. Yeah, now that we've shown, sorry.
No, you're fine.
So yeah, that's our time lapse, and the time lapse is obviously we're Platte Basin time lapse, so time lapse is a really central part of what we do. But we also do a lot of videography, photography, as you've seen. So we'll just end our presentation by showing this short trailer for this wetlands project that our colleague Grant Reiner edited together with a lot of different footage from the Platte Basin time-lapse team. So hope you enjoy.
Wetlands are somewhat of a transitional zone between the uplands and the deeper water of a lake.
The saline wetlands have a unique plant community that you really won't find in too many places in the state of Nebraska. They're close to an urban community where you feel like you're in a wild place.
The sandhills are mountainous sand dunes with wetlands peppered in between. The sandhills are magic.
The North Platte River in western Nebraska is such a unique landscape. It's hard to find another landscape as impressive.
Central Platte is internationally known, of course, for sandhill crane migration, and this plus the rainwater basins make a really important resource for ducks, geese, other water birds that are coming through.
If you think back to pioneer times, this whole area was nothing but open prairie. And then you had these pockets of wetlands out here in the rainwater basins embedded in that landscape.
Wetlands are everywhere. What makes Nebraska especially unique is that there's a ton of different types of wetlands. Without wetlands, you don't have this diverse array of species. It's super important that we protect these spaces.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for sharing all of that. And I'd invite anyone who is viewing this right now, if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat. If you have any specifically for the PBT team and just how they are able to, get all this amazing footage and images. I'll also be sharing this. This presentation is recorded, so I'll make sure that that goes up on the Game and Parks YouTube channel. And maybe if you guys would like the recording as well, we can figure out how to get that to you. And so I'll just be sending a feedback email essentially that will have all the just kind of links and information as well related to this project. Yeah, so we're working together. These guys are obviously getting to do the really fun part of getting out there in the wetlands and seeing what's out there. And Ted LaGrange is on this call. He's really master of the ship and helping us figure out what we're doing. And I kind of work on the education side and help with that. So it's a huge team effort, and I'm really excited about what we're doing and excited for this summer. I'm sure you guys are going to get even more amazing stuff. So
Yeah, thanks for having us, Grace. It's fun to put this together.
Yeah, it was fun to rewatch some of that and then see the new stuff too. So I'm really excited, and thank you guys for being here and taking some time on your Tuesday night. So we just got mostly compliments in the chat. So let's see. What do you look for to see if people are connecting to your stories? Was one question we just got.
What do you look for to see if people are connecting to your stories? I don't know. That's kind of a hard question a little bit. It's giving presentations like this over Zoom. It's hard, especially when I can't see anyone's face. But when we give presentations in larger physical spaces, you can read on people's faces if they're connecting with it or if they're falling asleep or whatnot. I don't think we've ever had anyone fall asleep on us, but just showing people stuff that they don't normally get to see, especially through camera trapping or drone work, is really what intrigues people. And also telling the stories of people out there on the landscape that are doing work in wetlands as well. Not everyone has the opportunity to meet folks like that. So we like to shine lights on the work that people are doing, and not just the species and the landscapes themselves, but the people that are working in those. So.
Yeah, and I would just say from an education perspective, sometimes there will be like surveys that we can put out there, you know, to evaluate people's experience with materials. So that might be something we do going forward. And then we'd had one other question of, are there any video or photo techniques you haven't been able to try yet, but hope to implement in the future?
Dakota, Ethan, do you guys have anything on that?
Oh, it's a good question, because I think we've implemented quite a lot of techniques
We really have.
of this project. I mean, doing more like macro video of invertebrates is always kind of complicated and not really done unless you're like BBC. But I think we kind of have some ways of sort of achieving that.
I would say macro time lapses, like long form macro time lapse. So picking
Like
some situation, picking some situation where you're looking at something really, really small for 6 months or something like that. I don't know what that scenario would be, but that would be really cool.
Dragonfly, you know, larva to adult or something.
Yeah, right.
For sure.
So,
Yeah, I think also even getting like even smaller is doing stuff like under a microscope, like nematodes and all that stuff in the soil that you can't even see with the naked eye. I think getting into that stuff more could be really, really cool and kind of show people an unseen world.
Yeah, that was a really good question. I'm glad that one was asked, because I am fascinated by the time lapse, like drone time lapse too. I think that's really awesome, cool stuff you guys are doing. So
yeah, it's definitely not a novel idea, but it is something that I haven't seen a lot of. So we're kind of just learning as we go. And the system we've figured out so far is working pretty well, and we're working out the kinks as we go. But yeah, I'm happy to say it's working, because I think it's going to be really cool when we have a full year at some of these locations.
Yeah, and how many time lapses do we have around the state, Mariah? Like close to 20 drone time lapses now.
I thought it was 14, but maybe it's 20. So
yeah, 15 to 20 in that range. So
yeah,
at least a few of those should work out.
Yeah, especially with wetlands changing so much all the time. It's definitely a cool way to see them. We had one other question pop in. Will you be using animations to show how and why wetlands develop over time? I don't know.
Well, we are at best amateur animators on the PBT team. And so we are very limited as to what we can show with the animation. We will be incorporating it in our project somehow, but I don't know how, like if it'll be a big element, just because we don't have anyone on our team that really focuses on that. But it would be cool to develop something. So
yeah, definitely good thoughts on that too, because animations over top of like images and stuff too always looks really cool, or showing processes. So
and we can do some of that stuff, but like putting, I don't know, we've overlaid text and different shapes and stuff on our time-lapse imagery before to show like a bank stream eroding. So we could probably do some creative stuff like that to better demonstrate what people are looking at when they're watching these time lapses.
Good ideas for our next meeting, right?
Yeah, right.
Awesome. Happy birthday, Dakota. Great
Oh,
work.
yay.
That is perfect. Any other last minute questions? Otherwise, we'll let you guys go and let Dakota go enjoy his birthday. Thanks for being here tonight. But I think that's probably good. So thank you guys for being willing to hop on here, and it was an awesome presentation. So I'm sure plenty of people like to watch it too later.
Yeah, thanks so much, everyone. If anyone has questions,
Yeah.
you can get our contact info from Grace, or if you just go to the Platte Basin Timelapse.com website, you can get our contact info there too. So.
Yeah, that's perfect. I'll send a feedback email to everyone that was registered for this and make sure all your guys' contact info is on that. So we'll go from there.
Sounds good. Thanks,
All right.
everyone.
Everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.
Grace.